Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Forum for Dialogue and Diplomacy, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our board members, our guest, and our esteemed guest speaker, Mr. Stephen Payne, Amnesty. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Stephen Payne.
So I'm very, very pleased to be here. And I wanted to specifically point out, thank you, Javed, for inviting me. And I want to also call out my very, very good friend, Ligari, who I've known for about 12 years now, and also Sajjad Burki, who I've known a little bit less time, about 4 or 5 years now, but we've worked together a lot with Imran Khan. So what I'm going to do is mostly just tell you a lot of stories, how I started working with Pakistan, because when I was in around 2001 when I went there, I'd really not been to that many places. I think I'd only left the United States a couple of times, and then suddenly found myself in the midst of international relations. But what happened was I was very involved with George Bush. In 1988, I was his traveling aide when his father ran for president. Really wasn't a very spectacular or interesting job. It was just the son of the vice president, and I was his traveling assistant and helped him get on time to his appointments and everything. But we developed a relationship then. And then when he ran for governor, I was a little bit involved there, but mostly I was working for our United States Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison. But then in about 1997, I went out and I formed my own lobbying firm in Austin. And I had some clients like the space program and JP Morgan and some others. And I was involved with Governor Bush a little bit here in Harris County, but just as friends. Then in 99, it was clear that he was going to run for president. And I went to him and I said, I'm going to help you. I want to travel with you. And I want to raise money for you, and I want to play a big role in the campaign. So I did. And I was the guy that negotiated the debates with the Gore people, myself and Andy Card, who went on to become the chief of staff. And most of the people that were with the campaign went on to take a job in the White House. But I had young children at the time, so I chose not to. I chose to keep my lobbying business going, and I decided to take on some federal clients. Word got around that I was working and doing some things, and so I expanded my role with NASA and with Boeing and Lockheed Martin and others. But then my friend General Lincoln Jones, who was here in Houston, asked me that if I would meet with him and this new military man that had become president of Pakistan by decree, of his own decree, and would I go there and meet with him? So I did. And we went and we met with him in, I guess, about April of 2001. Bush had just been elected president. And we went and we met and we talked mostly about energy projects because that's what Lincoln Jones was interested in. And I decided to see what I could do there. And then we got into a conversation about, could you help us? Mr. Payne, we know that you're very close to the president. We know that you didn't join the administration. Would you help us? And so we had a very specific conversation about what Pakistan could do and how we could improve relations, because during Bush's father's time, there was the policy of the U.S. was very much a parity. There was to be parity between India and Pakistan. Both countries were to be treated equally. And that was the policy. But in the Clinton administration, there was definitely a shift away from Pakistan and toward India. And so what once was a sort of an equal parity shifted away. And President Musharraf was very concerned about that. And he says, I want to get things back to equal. We even had a conversation about some guy named Osama bin Laden, which I'd never heard the name in my life. He says, I know he's somebody that y'all really want. Let us help you find him. We want to have a new cooperation on security. We want to bring the relationship back to a good one. So I went and considered it and decided that I wanted to take it on, but I wanted to sort of get the president's blessings first. So I went In June of 2001, and again, this is all before 9/11, I went in and met with President Bush and with Condoleezza Rice, who was the National Security Advisor. We actually happened to all be in Poland, where I was organizing his trip to Poland, but I had a few minutes to talk to him. And I told him about my conversation with President Musharraf. And Dr. Rice was there, and I went through everything. And after about 5 minutes, she stopped me and said, "You know, Mr. President, I haven't heard any of this. Pakistanis aren't saying anything like this to us. They still seem quite uncooperative. They still seem like they don't want to work with us." And the president looked at me and he says, "Are you sure you didn't misinterpret?" And I said, "No, sir. I even went back and recapped the whole conversation. I know that I have it right." And he looked at Condoleezza Rice and he says, "Look, let Steve try this. He wants to be a back channel between President Musharraf directly and us, cutting out all the bureaucrats in between. Let's let him try it. I know him. I've known him for a long time. I trust Steve, and he's not stupid. I'm sure that he has it just right." Then he looks at me and he says, "And if you get this wrong, we're going to pretend that we don't even know you." I said, "Thank you, sir." That really gives me a vote of confidence. So that happened in June of 2001, and so we were off. We started working together. We ultimately organized sort of our first meeting between Mahmoud, who was the head of the ISI at the time, and George Tenet, who was the head of the CIA. The meeting was scheduled for September 7th of 2001. And in the meantime, I went and was very bold in how I did these things. I kind of knew what the Pakistanis want, and I knew sort of what the Americans want. So I wrote both lists of sort of what both sides wanted and sort of exchanged it with the other and said, here's what I think the U.S. can do for you. Here's what for Pakistan, here's what I think that Pakistan can do for you. So we went through it. The meetings with Tenet were good. And we exchanged our lists, and at the time our contract was with the ISI. I mean, with General Mahmoud directly, and we registered it properly. We were the properly registered lobbyists of the government of Pakistan, but working for the spy agency. And then 9/11 happened. I had just come back the day before, and it was obviously the whole world changed. And in fact, a little interesting aside, on the 8th of September, General Jones, who was a proud West Point grad, took General Mahmoud to the West Point game. And I'd gone back to Houston. But they stayed in the Marriott Hotel at Newark Airport, 2 floors below 2 of the 9/11 hijackers. So you can imagine the FBI inquiries that we got over the next 10 days or so, coming to our offices. Why were you there? What's going on? The ISI, head of the ISI, staying literally 100 feet away from 2 of the 9/11 hijackers. And obviously everything was cleared up very quickly. But I mean, this was a very, very interesting couple of days of time. But when 9/11 happened, we got in touch with General Mahmoud and with his staff, and the message was clear. And the message was clear from us to them and from them to us, that Pakistan would help the United States, that Pakistan would join this fight against terrorism. So Musharraf's statement made on the 13th of September, but the evening of the 12th of September for the US, was written by me. I wrote it, I faxed it to President Musharraf, and he wrote simply, "Okay," and signed it. We put it out on the Associated Press, and then he gave the speech about an hour later on television. And it was word for word, exactly what we wrote is exactly what he said, how he declared his support to help the United States. Those lists that we had written a couple of months before were immediately thrown out, and 500 new things were added. And it was a lot. It was a very, very strong relationship. Immediately, $38 billion in national debt was wiped away. Billions of dollars of military equipment were transferred, including the F-16s, which Instead of giving F-16s, the Clinton administration wanted to give grain, as I'm sure you all remember that. Instead, they were given F-16s, they were given C-130s, they were given, we were a key part of getting the major non-NATO ally status granted to Pakistan, which unfortunately Congress, several members of Congress have been trying to take away for the last few years. The TAPI pipeline, which was mentioned in the introduction, we got that started by simply asking President Musharraf to sign a take-or-pay agreement for the gas, and that made it all possible. It ended with not ended, but kind of really officially got started with a trilateral meeting between the presidents of Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Turkmenistan. And so we did a lot to change the region. And I think for the next several years, U.S.-Pakistan relations were definitely on an uptick. Everything was going very well. Unfortunately, years later, it changed. I think that's probably because I was no longer in the middle of it, starting in about 2005. But between 2001 and 2004, things were great. Both sides were very, very happy with the relationship. But there are some interesting things that happen even while we were happy with the relationship, some interesting stories that I've really never told publicly, but I think that they're interesting. So we all recall in December of 2001, there was an attack on the Indian Parliament. And there was a lot of suspicion that Pakistan had directly been involved in the launching of this attack and all this. And I always wonder what would happen if gunmen walked into the US Congress and shot up several members of Congress. I mean, it would be a huge issue, really an act of war. And so this happened in early December of 2001. And then on the 30th December in the morning, it was a Friday morning, I remember it very well, I got a call from the colonel at the ISI I was normally working with on a daily basis. And he called and said, the president would like to speak to you tonight, your time, but his early Saturday morning. I thought, okay, this has never happened before. I've only met Musharraf twice by this point, and he'd never asked to speak to me at home. But I said, okay, I'll be available at 11 o'clock tonight. But it was between Christmas and New Year's, so President Bush was off in Crawford, Texas, as he always did, and the staff was reduced. So he had Steve Hadley as the national security advisor. Dr. Rice was off with her family or whatever.
If the crowd allows me, I would like to ask the first question. Okay. My first question actually to you is, from what I hear, you said two-time lobbyist. The first time you worked for General Pervez Musharraf, and the second time for Prime Minister Imran Khan. Is that correct?
That's right.
I see two very differing, opposing policies of the two presidents, where General Musharraf joined the war on terror, and Prime Minister Imran Khan said, well, we do not want to be a part of any wars. And you were representing both head of states. So what is your position on that?
I think the one thing that those two gentlemen have in common is that they both were acting on behalf of Pakistan, what they thought was in the best interest of Pakistan, without any kind of self-enrichment of themselves or their friends or anyone else. I honestly think they were honest people who were trying to do the best job that they could do. This is the common thread that I think was between the two of them.
Thank you. Yes, Siraj. And please try to introduce yourself when you ask a question.
My name is Siraj Nawarsi. We were talking, it's post 9/11, but I wanted to go back into history a little bit. I was too young to remember Carter times. Reagan onwards.
Am I right to say that there is an impression that most democratic administrations are not too friendly to Pakistan, whereas the Republican administrations generally have been good to Pakistan? Is there a particular reason? Is this just an observation or impression? Is that true? And if true, what are your views on that?
Certainly in the time that I've been involved, that has proven to be true. We were looking at the time of Bush 41 administration. It was that parity that I discussed before. And then in the Clinton administration, there was definitely a shift away from Pakistan and towards India. And then this is what Musharraf wanted to try to get back, and this is what I think the Bush administration did a good job of doing, of trying to keep parity between the two and show a lot of help and support for both countries. So certainly in the administrations that I was directly involved with, that's the case. Certainly President Trump and Imran got along very, very well. They had a good personal relationship, and now that seems to not so much be the case with the Biden administration.
And Obama didn't really trust Pakistan that much either.
I don't really have a strong opinion on what was going on with the Obama administration, but I think in general that's probably accurate.
Yes.
Hello. No.
Dono ko.
All right. My name is Iram Farouk. I was in this provincial assembly in Pakistan. I wanted to ask you one thing, which I always wanted to ask somebody from the US administration, that when Musharraf said, either you are with us, he said that Bush had said to him, either you are with us or you're not. And that was the reason for Pakistan to be a part of the Afghanistan war. You can say yes or no on that. And then the second thing is, do you think it was a wise decision that Pakistan had lost so much because of the Afghan war? Was it a wise decision from Musharraf that we went in a war which was not even ours, and we are still facing the consequences right now? Thank you.
So two things. I think number one, it was probably not so much President Bush that gave that strong ultimatum. I think that it was more Armitage, who was the Deputy Secretary of State at the time. He gave that message directly to General Mahmoud. But Musharraf was very quick to, after we had a quick conversation on the 12th of September, to come on board and in a strong way. As whether it was the right decision or the wrong decision, I think certainly at the beginning it was a good decision. The Pakistan economy and the welfare of the country and everything improved significantly over the first few years after 9/11. But I think just like in the US, I mean, people got tired of it. It began to be a drag financially and in loss of lives and everything. And so I think it went on too long. I think that there was a lot of ways that they could have sped up the resolution of the Afghan situation. And now here we are again, basically right back to where we were in the year 2000. I mean, I don't think that there's much difference of Afghanistan right now versus the Afghanistan of 2000. So unfortunately, everything was a waste, really. It's what it boiled down to.
Anybody else? I feel really important having two mics in my hand. So, Mr. Payne, if you could kindly shed some light about the events surrounding Osama bin Laden's capture, because the impression in Pakistan, the common impression and the popular belief in Pakistan at that time was that somehow Pakistan's sovereignty had been infringed upon. It was a good act, but perhaps the PR around that capture was not handled well. So if you could be kind enough to share some interesting details, if you can. Thank you.
And one of the things I can tell you about that is that this was something that actually President Musharraf would joke around with me about. He would say to me, so we have bin Laden in a cell, when do you want us to let him out and give him to you? And we would laugh and everything. And then when he was finally captured, of course, this was 4 years after Musharraf was out of power, when Osama bin Laden was finally captured. I asked him, I said, so did you know that he was there? And he says, Payne, you paid us $100 million a month to look for bin Laden. If we knew where he was, we would have put him somewhere where he couldn't have just gotten in a car and driven away like he could any time. In that house where he was, he had the freedom to leave anytime he wanted. And if we knew where he was, we would have put him somewhere in a cell and had to keep paying us the $100 million while we looked for him together. So that was his response to me. It certainly makes sense. Certainly if they knew, I don't think that they would have given him the kind of ability to change his situation at any time, which he could have done. He could have gotten in a car and driven away any day. One interesting aside, I'll just to tell, this is sort of back to the beginning of the relationship in 2001. The reason Musharraf liked this very streamlined approach from him to the ISI and a colonel via fax or phone call to me and then straight into the administration. That was our line of communication because he didn't trust his ambassador. She was appointed by his predecessor and he didn't trust her, Mulia Lodi, nice lady, but he didn't trust her. And we ran everything without her even knowledge. She would basically just be sitting at her desk and I guess somebody would call her from the administration and say, okay, we gave you another $2 billion for this. And she said, okay, thank you. And she had nothing to do with anything that was going on. She just got to take credit for all of the work that we were doing until one day in fact, I would even meet with Musharraf in Washington when he would be there, and she would be sitting outside, and I would come out, and she knew who I was, but she didn't dare say anything to me, and then I would leave. And then, funny thing, I was with Sajjad, with Berkey, a few years ago, and we went and met with Imran at the UN. And we walked out, just he and I and Atif walked out with Imran, and she was there as ambassador to the UN, and I just saw this look on her face like she was terrified. Oh no, it's happening again. He's gonna circumvent me. But no, we didn't. She didn't know anything about what we were doing. And finally one day she called me and she demanded to meet with me, and I called Islamabad and they said, okay, meet with her, but don't tell her anything different than what you would tell a member of Congress that you were meeting with or something like that. So I went and met with her and she lectured me about this and that. And I said, Madam Ambassador, you've got to take credit for a lot of really fantastic developments between our two countries. So be happy for it. She didn't like that response much. Anyway.
She got fired a few days after the meeting.
Yeah, my name is.
Sorry.
Yes.
My name is Akram Arai.
Can you?
And Akram Arai, and I have one question for you. Why U.S. government is always opposes any project in Pakistan and keep it as a welfare state, like a gas pipeline from Iran to Pakistan, gas pipelines from Central Asia to Pakistan, CPAC project, anything else. Every project Pakistan starts, there is a huge opposition on that one. What's the main reason for
You mean
that?
from the
Why that
Indians
happens?
or?
Americans, the sanctions,
No, but
Iran.
I think the Americans are supportive of these pipelines. I mean, the Americans were funding the Asian Development Bank's efforts for the TAPI pipeline even recently. And I'll tell you an aside, a project that I'm working on now with Atif to bring electricity to Pakistan. And it's basically the same thing as the TAPI gas pipeline, but it's more direct. We are working with a Turkish company called Çalık Energy, where they have a huge power plant in Turkmenistan. And we were going to bring an electric wire directly to Pakistan across Afghanistan and then electrify Pakistan. And cheaply too. Currently Pakistan is paying about 11 cents per kilowatt hour for its coal plants that were built by the Chinese. And we were going to offer this power for 6.9 cents. So it was a huge savings for the government, and it was clean, as opposed to coal is very dirty and causing smog in Islamabad. But unfortunately, we just couldn't get past the problems that the contracts had already been signed, probably with people that were lining their own pockets, and nobody in the lower levels of the government would give us what we needed to be. And that was for the betterment of the people of Pakistan. Reason I bring this up is US wasn't opposed to this at all. US and Turkish governments were both pushing hard for this project, wanted it to happen, realized it was better for the people of Pakistan to reduce their electricity rates by 30%, but we just couldn't get it past the bureaucracy, who I guess had all been paid off.
Kaiser Lashkari. What can we, Pakistani Americans residing in America, do? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Give us some specific things that we can do to strengthen US and Pakistan ties while sitting here in America.
Yep. So follow the Armenians and and the Israelis. I mean, there are really not that many Armenians in the United States, yet they are an absolutely powerful lobby in Washington because they get unified. A couple thousand of them will show up in Washington on the same day, and they'll organize themselves in the morning, and they'll make sure that every congressional office is visited by a group of Armenians to push their agenda, which is usually an anti-Azerbaijan, anti-Turkey agenda. But follow what they do, because what they do is very, very effective. And yet you have many, many, many more people than here in the US than the Armenians do. Organize yourselves into a strong diaspora, give political money, all show up on the same day, go and visit your congressman, and insist on being heard, and insist on the relationship getting better. The Pakistan caucus is, unfortunately, I think it's 9 members now, and this is abysmal. And it should be, the Pakistan caucus should be 8 to 10 times that, and it's not. And it just needs the diaspora just needs to organize itself better through the embassy, and I'm sure that it can be done. You have plenty of resources, plenty of people to get involved. I'm sure all 50 states have plenty of Pakistani Americans there, and so you can be influential if you just organize yourselves and get it done.
When we started off here.
Exactly. And Kaiser, thank you for coming. Kaiser is my very good friend, best chef in Houston.
Yes, next.
Quick question. I know media is designed to sell
Can't hear
negative
you.
news, and every day when I read newspaper, right, from Pakistan, you get depressed, right? The news are not good. I said, news is negative, economics, flood, etc. What trajectory you see that are positive things that are happening in Pakistan, few items that you think is a positive trajectory, and piggybacking on his question, what can we do to capitalize on that?
So to be honest, I'll go back to my speech. I'm troubled by what I see in Pakistan now, because I think that there's been actually a roll backwards away from representative democracy. I was delighted to see the law change where women are now a predominant part of the parliament in Pakistan, and these were positive things that happened in the early 2000s. And I think that a representative democracy was moving forward quite well, and there was a lot of positive news. Unfortunately, there was some greed that took place amongst some officials, and that kind of rolled things backwards a little. But what's going on now is even a rollback even further, where Pakistan is jailing or attempting to jail its former leaders and their staff. Imran's chief of staff was put in jail for 60 days, and I think tortured. And this is just not the right direction. So I think there just needs to be a sort of an overturn, a refreshment of relations inside the country, and then I think there can be a restoration of good relations between the US and Pakistan. Pakistan is an important ally. It's been, I would say that it's been a more reliable partner overall over the years from 1947 to now than India has been. And because India, plays around with the Russians a lot and did all the way through the Soviet times. And I think Pakistan has been a more substantive and reliable partner, and we just need to get back to those days.
Okay.
Okay, Steve, I know you have worked with a lot of world leaders and you have been friends with a lot of world leaders. First of all, my question is, how was your experience with Prime Minister Khan? How did you find him different than the other world leaders? That's my question. And one thing which I want to tell the audience here is, when we signed the contract, lobbying contract with Stephen Payne, it was a $1.2 million contract. But since it was year 2020, it was election year and there was COVID, I would like to tell first thing is it was a $0 contract. It was first time in the history of Pakistan that Pakistan government has signed a lobbying contract in the US for which government of Pakistan was not paying for it. It was diaspora funded. But by the time when we were supposed to pay Steve, Steve did not charge us a penny for lobbying for Pakistan in that 1 year. Just because he said it was election year and it was a COVID year, we could not do much, though he did a lot, like he just mentioned, all the 27 points he helped Pakistan on FATF. But still, Steve, more than a lobbyist, I know you're a good friend of Pakistan and a good friend of Prime Minister Imran Khan. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. So I met Imran in 2003 when he wasn't even in Parliament yet. He was just a former cricketer. I was introduced to him by Sheikh Nahyan, one of the rulers of Abu Dhabi. He introduced me, and he knew that I was working closely with Pakistan at the time, and that's when we first met. And we didn't stay in close touch until you, Atif, and Berkey reintroduced me to Imran. But I'll say the same thing that I did before, which is simply that he's an honest man. I think that he truly believes that he's trying to do what's right for the country. I don't think he's trying to make any money. He already has plenty of personal wealth. And I think he's just trying to do the right thing. And this is the one thing that I saw in President Musharraf as well, is just gentlemen trying to do what's best for the country without trying to enrich themselves or their friends. Okay.
My name is Barkat Charania. In the first of this lecture series, we were told that countries have interests and not friends. And I think what you said here corroborates that fact that really the countries have interest and they work on their interests. Can you tell us as to what can both administrations do with your long experience, or almost 4 or 5 administrations here and 2 administrations there? What can both administrations do to converge that interest and make sure the kind of misunderstanding that has happened recently does not happen?
Yeah. Thank you. One of the things that I wish would have happened toward the end of the Afghan conflict is when the U.S. was making it clear that they wanted to leave, it was unfortunate that we didn't simply turn all the equipment and basically hand everything over to the Pakistani army. This is something that I was supporting. This is something that I spoke to General Bajwa about. I thought it would have been in the best interest of both countries. I think if we would have done that 2-3 years ago, right when the Trump administration was closing down and the Biden administration was starting, I think that the situation in Afghanistan would be well under control by the Pakistan Army, who would be basically utilizing all of our equipment, and we wouldn't have just thrown it back into the hands of the Taliban again.